Welcome back to the Take a Step podcast, where we help young men embrace the process and take action. Today, we've got another edition of the Weekly Mile, where we take a look back at one of the previous editions of the Weekly Mile newsletter and dive in. And on this edition of the Weekly Mile, the title is Leadership is Lonely. There's a moment in every man's growth journey that feels like a crossroads. You've been doing the hard work, breaking unhealthy patterns, building better habits, getting serious about your faith, and holding yourself to a higher standard. On the outside, you're making noticeable progress, but on the inside, a question starts to quietly echo. Why do I feel so alone right now? A few weeks ago, I was on a high school church retreat, and one of my students voiced this very tension with a level of self-awareness that honestly rivals most adults I know. He told me that over the past year or two, he's been intentionally detaching from the ways of the world and focusing on his spiritual, mental, and physical growth. He's seen real progress, and I've seen it too. But then he said something that really just stopped me in my tracks. He said, even though I've grown so much, I've never felt more alone. Now that hits, doesn't it? Now, if you've ever tried to level up your life, chances are you've bumped into this wall. You start waking up earlier, you stop going out just to go out, you care less about what's trending and more about what's true. Your standards are getting higher, your priorities shift, your convictions strengthen. You start seeing things more clearly, and little by little, you begin to feel like you're walking alone. The truth is, you kind of are. When your desires start changing, your conversations follow. When your values start shifting, your hobbies change. When your direction gets clear, the old way of connecting with people doesn't quite click anymore. And this is where it gets complicated, because many of the relationships you're now detaching from are the ones that have been with you the longest. There are shared memories, inside jokes, and deep trust woven into those relationships. But now you're starting to feel like those relationships are pulling you backward instead of pushing you forward. Not because those people are bad, but because they no longer match the man you're becoming. And so you start to pull away. But here's the twist. As you're letting go of those old relationships, you haven't yet built the new ones. You're no longer where you used to be, but you're not fully settled where you're going either. This space, the in-between, is where your loneliness starts to creep in. And that's exactly where my student was feeling. It's what I felt, and maybe it's what you're feeling right now. This is the stretch of the journey that breaks many men. Not because they don't have the vision or discipline to grow, but because they weren't prepared for the isolation that often comes with it. We crave connection. We were made for it. But when your path narrows, your circle often shrinks. And if you're not ready for that, it can feel like you're doing something wrong. But hear me on this. You're not doing anything wrong. You're becoming someone different. Jesus himself gave us the heads up in Matthew 7, verses 13 and 14, when he said, "Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow is the road that leads to life, and only few find it." Only a few. That means if you're walking a path that feels lonely, you might actually be exactly where God wants you. You're not being punished, you're being refined. You're in a season of transition where the shallow, surface level relationships are dying off to make room for something deeper and more impactful. The difference is shifting your mindset from width to depth. Like, would you rather have 100 pennies or 4 quarters? Obviously the 4 quarters, because it's less clutter and more efficient. But what's most important is that you keep moving forward. Don't let loneliness pull you back into what's familiar. Don't let the absence of connection make you question your direction. Instead, use this time to develop each area of the STEP framework: strength, tribe, expertise, and praise that we always talk about. Strength being your physical health, tribe being your closest relationships, expertise being your professional value, and praise being your spiritual life. And while it may feel slow or even sad at times, you can trust that God's not wasting any of it. He's shaping you. He's strengthening your character, and in his timing, and I'll emphasize his timing, not yours, he will bring the right people into your life who are walking the same narrow road with the same fire in their hearts. But until then, stay consistent, be resilient, trust his timing, and keep taking steps. Now, before we wrap up, I want to emphasize this. Our way of life, or in other words, our lifestyle, will attract our closest relationships. So if you claim to have gone through this massive personal growth journey, but you still surround yourself with the same people, I challenge that way of thinking, because at the end of the day, the greatest accelerator to the man that we're going to become are the people that we surround ourselves with. So find the right people that are going to push you towards that person that you ultimately want to become, and let's take some steps. Here are 3 questions as some good next steps. What relationships in your life are pulling you away from the man God is shaping you to become? Are you prioritizing depth over width in your relationships right now? When loneliness creeps in, where do you turn for comfort? And does that source push you forward or pull you backwards? Thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Take a Step podcast. If you enjoyed it, please leave a rating on whichever platform you're listening. And always remember that no matter where you are in your growth journey, every mile begins with a step. We'll talk to you in the next episode.